Have you ever been laughed at by your own family while you stood there humiliated and dripping wet? That's what happened to me. At 76 years old, I was invited to what was supposed to be a family celebration. My daughter demanded I wear a suit, bake my famous lemon pie, and smile politely for her husband's colleagues. I did all of it. I played along. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd still be treated like a father. But instead, in front of strangers, my daughter shoved me into the pool and shouted, "Cool off, Dad." And the worst part, everyone laughed. My grandson even pulled out his phone to film it, as though my humiliation was entertainment. That was the moment I realized something had to change. Within an hour, soaked and shivering, I made a decision that would turn my life and theirs upside down. Stay with me, because what came after that little joke was the day I finally took back my dignity. The phone rang at 8:30 sharp on a Thursday morning. I didn't even need to look at the caller ID. I knew it would be Clara. My daughter has always been precise, never too early, never too late. She likes to believe she's being considerate, but really, she's setting the terms. I lifted the receiver and answered in my most formal voice. Alfred Hampton speaking. I knew that tone irritated her. And yes, maybe I took a little secret pleasure in that. "Dad," she sighed. "How many times do I have to tell you caller ID exists? You don't have to announce yourself like it's 1960. That mix of condescension and irritation in her voice has become her trademark these past few years. Anyway, how are you today? I glanced out the window at my garden hedges, trimmed roses blooming the world orderly. Well, I hummed. I woke up on this side of the earth, so I can't complain. She didn't laugh. Clara rarely laughs at my jokes anymore. Instead, her voice snapped into business mode. "We're having a barbecue on Saturday. Victor got promoted at the firm, and we're hosting his colleagues and boss. You need to come. 2:00 sharp." I almost told her no. The last thing I wanted was to stand around like a relic in front of a bunch of people who barely knew my name, clapping for Victor as though I'd raised him myself. But before I could speak, she barreled on. "Bring your apple pie. Everyone loves it. And Dad, please wear something decent. Not those old cardigans you live in. This is important for Victor's career." There it was again, that tone. Not an invitation, but an order. Once upon a time, Clara would curl up in my armchair and beg me to tell her a bedtime story. Now she spoke to me like I was a cranky old man who had to be managed. "I understand," I said softly, adding just enough weariness to my voice to let her think she was in charge. "I'll be there at 2 with pie." "Good. And Dad, don't be late." She hung up without even saying goodbye. I put the phone down slowly, staring at the mantel where Margaret's photograph rests. My wife's bright eyes smiled back at me through the glass. She's been gone 7 years now, taken by cancer, but some days it feels like yesterday. "You should see what our daughter has become," I whispered to the frame. "Bossy as ever, but not with your grace." When Margaret was alive, Clara visited every weekend. She'd bring Victor and little Ethan, and the house would ring with laughter. Margaret would bake cookies with Ethan while I showed him how to build birdhouses. Back then, Victor was still climbing the corporate ladder, money was tight, and I helped them quietly with the mortgage. Margaret insisted I keep it discreet, no pride wounded, no debts owed. But once Margaret passed, the visits grew fewer. First monthly, then only holidays, and now only when something was needed. Clara still called every week, though. Not to ask about me, but to make sure I hadn't done anything unreasonable with my money. She thinks I live on nothing but a pension check and a few savings. If only she knew the truth, that I invested carefully for decades, and that I paid for more than just Ethan's school tuition. Their European vacations too, though she never connected the dots. I sighed, rolled up my sleeves, and headed to the kitchen. Apple pie wouldn't bake itself, and if there's one thing I've always been guilty of, it's keeping my word. As I pulled out the old family recipe, Margaret's mother's handwriting still faded but legible. I felt the same heaviness settle in my chest. Not physical, no. My doctor says my heart is sound like a man of 50. No, this weight is different. The heaviness of knowing Saturday would be another day of quiet humiliation, another reminder that I was no longer seen as a man with a story, but a prop in someone else's show. But I went through the motions anyway. I washed my best shirt. I ironed my pants. I even made an appointment with the barber, though my silver hair hardly needed trimming. Margaret always said I looked sharp when I bothered to dress up. Maybe I wanted to honor her memory, even if no one else cared. By Saturday morning, the pie was ready, golden, fragrant, a masterpiece. I packed it carefully into its carrier, glanced once more at Margaret's picture, and murmured, "Wish me luck." And with that, I set out toward Clara's perfect neighborhood, my pie on the seat beside me, and my dignity already hanging by a thread. Have you ever gone to a family gathering and felt like you didn't belong at all? Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, your city, your state, or even your country. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this one. Clara and Victor's house stood in a row of nearly identical mansions, brick facades, manicured lawns, and expensive cars gleaming in the driveways. I pulled up in my Buick, a model Victor once called an antique with wheels, and sat for a moment staring at their front porch. Music and laughter drifted out from the backyard, mixed with the smell of grilled meat. A celebration, a success story. And me, a character reluctantly invited to play the role of the sweet old father. I stepped out, balancing the pie carrier in my hands. Before I even reached the door, Clara swung it open. She was flawless, of course, blue summer dress hair in a perfect wave, not a wrinkle out of place. She looked me up and down. "Dad, you're late," she said, lips tight. I glanced at my watch. "It's 1:58. Still," she replied sharply. She took the pie from me, lifted the lid, and frowned. "Apple, I thought you'd make strawberry. Victor's colleagues prefer berry. You asked for my specialty," I reminded her. "This is it." She sighed dramatically, like a martyr carrying the burdens of the world. "Fine, whatever. Come in." Inside the house buzzed with voices. Glasses clinked, expensive perfume mingled with the tang of charcoal from the grill. The air was thick with conversation. Real estate deals, stock tips, vacations in Tuscany. I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's movie. "Dad, remember Robert Sheldon?" Clara gestured toward a tall man with a razor-cut beard. "He's Victor's boss." I extended my hand, smiling. "Pleasure to meet you again." Robert's shake was polite, his eyes already scanning the room for someone more interesting. "Your daughter speaks highly of you," he said with an air of formality. "I doubt she's mentioned much," I replied. Clara jumped in before the silence could stretch. "My father used to work as a sanitation inspector," she announced brightly, as if confessing to a charming quirk. "He saw all sorts of unglamorous things." Robert chuckled awkwardly. "Well, that must have been enlightening." "Oh, don't let him start." Clara laughed. "He'll talk for hours about cockroaches in restaurant kitchens." Robert excused himself to find a drink, and Clara turned back to me. "Get yourself something to eat, Dad. Please don't just stand there." She drifted away before I could answer, leaving me among strangers. I made my way to the drinks table, poured myself a small glass of scotch, and tried to fade into the wallpaper. That's when I heard Grandpa. I turned. Ethan. My grandson, taller than I remembered, dark hair hanging over his eyes, his hands already glued to his phone. He wore designer sneakers and jeans that probably cost more than my suit. "Good to see you, son," I said warmly. "How's school?" He shrugged, poured himself a Coke. "It's fine. Your mom said you were into programming. How's that going?" "Quit. Boring." He sipped without looking at me. I nodded, unsure of what else to say. We used to build bird feeders together, fish off the dock chart constellations in the summer sky. Now he stood 3 feet away as if I were invisible. "Gotta go, Grandpa," he muttered, already spotting a group of friends out by the pool. "Sure," I whispered, but he was gone. I sipped my scotch, letting its burn ground me. Victor was at the grill, surrounded by co-workers, laughing too loudly at his own jokes. Clara floated among the women like a queen bee, making sure everyone noticed her perfect home, her perfect family, her perfect life. A woman approached, smiling politely. "You must be Clara's father." "Pamela Greer, my husband, works with Victor." "Yes." "Alfred Hampton," I said, extending my hand. "You must be proud," she cooed. "Such a beautiful family. Such a successful son-in-law." "Yes," I said automatically, though the word tasted bitter. "My parents live with us," Pamela added, her voice filled with self-congratulation. At their age, they shouldn't be alone. "Do you live with Clara too?" "No, I have my own house." Her smile faltered, replaced with sympathy. "Oh, that must be lonely. Hard to be alone at your age." "I'm 75, not 105, I replied, sharper than I meant. "I managed just fine." She flushed, murmured something, and quickly drifted away. I downed the rest of my scotch. Better to be invisible than pitied. "Dad." Clara's voice was suddenly at my shoulder. "You've started drinking already. Please don't overdo it. Remember Christmas, 1 glass, Clara." "Well, good. Just don't embarrass us, okay?" She patted my arm like one would a child, and then turned to greet another guest. I felt my face flush hot, not from the alcohol, but from humiliation. Each word, each look chipped away at my dignity. By the time we sat down for dinner, I was placed at the far end of the table next to the children. Victor made a toast to his promotion, Clara glowed with pride, and the guests clapped. Then, as if on cue, all eyes turned to me, and my father-in-law, Alfred Victor, declared with a smug grin, a man who worked hard his whole life and taught us the value of sanitation. Laughter rippled down the table. I raised my glass anyway. "To Victor," I said quietly, and that was my role the old man in the corner tolerated but never respected. Dinner blurred past me in a haze of voices that weren't meant for me. The steak on my plate was overcooked, the salad drowned in vinegar, but I ate in silence. I'd been invisible all evening, and maybe that was for the best. Better invisible than mocked. At least that's what I thought until it happened. I had wandered toward the pool afterward, my scotch glass empty, the laughter of Clara's guests fading into background noise. The water glittered in the twilight, perfectly blue, perfectly still. I sat down in a chair by the edge, my suit jacket tugging at my shoulders, my thoughts far away. That's when Clara appeared, her heels clicking against the stone. Dad, she scolded, why are you sitting here alone again? You should be socializing. Honestly, it's embarrassing. I was talking with Ethan earlier, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. We were remembering, he told me, she cut in, rolling her eyes. Dad, no one wants to hear stories from 50 years ago. You always go on about the past as if it's relevant. It's not. People are here to celebrate Victor, not to listen to your lectures. I swallowed hard, keeping my voice low. Life doesn't begin with you, Clara, and it won't end with me. Stories from the past, oh, for heaven's sake, she snapped loud enough that a few guests turned their heads. You're doing it again. You always do this. You come into my house, you sulk in the corner, and then you make everyone uncomfortable with your speeches about the wisdom of age. Clara, I said quietly. I didn't accuse anyone. You didn't have to. Her voice rose again, sharper now. The looks you give us, the way you judge this house, our friends, everything. You act like you're better than us when you're the one clinging to old cardigans and boring stories about roaches in diners. My cheeks burned. Guests were staring now, their conversations falling into silence. I tried to calm her. You're wrong, Clara. I never. And then she stepped closer. I saw it in her eyes, not just irritation, but real anger, raw and unfiltered. You know what you need, Dad, to chill out. Before I could react, her hands shoved hard against my chest. The world tipped backward. My arms flailed. Then splash. Cold water swallowed me whole. My suit dragged me down heavy and suffocating. For a moment, panic clawed at me. My glasses slipped away, and the world became nothing but blur and chlorine. I kicked upward, bursting through the surface with a gasp. The sound that met me wasn't concern. It wasn't shock. It was laughter. Cool off. Dad, Clara's voice rang across the yard, followed by a wave of chuckles. Victor tried to hide his grin. Guests covered their mouths, giggling. And Ethan, my grandson, stood with his phone out recording. No one asked if I was all right. No hand reached out to help. Just laughter, sharp and cruel, echoing in my ears as I dragged myself to the pool's edge and heaved my soaked body onto the stone. My suit clung to me like a second skin, heavy and ruined. My hair plastered flat. My chest heaved. I grabbed blindly until I found my glasses at the pool's edge, shoved them back on, and saw clearly again. I saw Clara doubled over with laughter, Victor smirking, the guests grinning, Ethan's phone still pointed at me. That was the moment something inside me broke. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I didn't even look back at them. I simply walked, dripping through the house, leaving wet footprints on Clara's polished floor. I collected my jacket, my keys, and stepped into the night air. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel, water dripping from my sleeves. For the first time in years, tears burned hot in my eyes. I cried for the loss of Margaret, for the daughter who no longer saw me as a man, for the grandson who found my humiliation worth posting online. But the tears dried quickly. What replaced them wasn't sorrow. It was steel. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my mind was clear. I stripped off the ruined suit, Margaret's gift on our 40th anniversary, and stood under a hot shower. The water coursed over me, washing away the chlorine, the stench of laughter, the shame. Each drop seemed to scrub off, not just the pool water, but years of swallowed humiliation. When I emerged wrapped in a robe, I sat at the edge of the bed and looked at Margaret's picture on the nightstand. "What would you say now, love?" I whispered. That she didn't mean it. That I should forgive and forget, the silence answered me. Margaret had always defended Clara even when her sharpness cut deep. But Margaret wasn't here anymore, and I knew in that moment that my patience had ended. That night I made a decision. Not rash, not emotional, but deliberate. The last laugh would not belong to them. From now on, my life would. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed listening to the old clock in the hallway mark every passing second. Each tick felt like a reminder you've wasted years letting them diminish you. By the time the sun broke over Charleston, the decision was no longer a storm of emotion. It was calm, deliberate, and final. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, opened my leather-bound notebook, and drew a single line across the page. At the top, I wrote in firm block letters, "New orders." For the first time in years, I was taking command of my own life. The first call I made was to my financial advisor, Jonathan Marks, a man who had managed my investments for nearly 2 decades. He answered cheerfully, "Good morning, Mr. Hampton." "A bit early for you, isn't it, Jonathan?" I said, my voice steady. "We need to make some changes." I explained quickly, firmly, that I wanted every account Clara had access to shut down. The tuition account for Ethan's private academy closed. The monthly automatic transfer that went straight into Clara and Victor's mortgage canceled. Even the slush fund I'd set aside for their emergencies, always a new car, never a true crisis, was to be dissolved immediately. Jonathan hesitated. "Sir, if I may, these are significant adjustments." "Are you certain I'm not just certain?" I told him. "I'm overdue. They've mistaken my generosity for obligation. That ends today." He tried once more. "This will cause, let's say, an uproar in their household." "Let it," I replied. "I've endured enough uproar in mine." By the time I hung up, my hands had stopped trembling. My pulse was even. One decision, and the ground had shifted under Clara's perfect house. The second call was harder. Miles Walker, my attorney, and an old fishing companion picked up with his usual gruff warmth. "Alfred thought you'd be on the water this morning." "No, Miles. I need to see you in your office. Today, if possible. It's about my will." There was a pause. "Your will?" "Yes. I want it rewritten. Completely. Clara and Victor are to be removed as heirs. The house, the accounts, everything they expect, I'm cutting them out." Miles exhaled slowly. "That's a serious step, Alfred. Family fights come and go. Are you sure you want to do something you can't take back?" "Family fights are raised voices," I said flatly. "This is something else. This is years of disrespect, topped off by a daughter who shoved her 75-year-old father into a swimming pool for a laugh. They forfeited the right to call it family." He didn't argue again. "All right, come Monday at 2. I'll prepare a draft." The moment I ended the call, I felt lighter, as though I'd unclenched a fist I hadn't realized I'd been making for years. The third call was the boldest of all. I dialed the number for Emma Chandler, a realtor I'd known since she first sold Clara and Victor their suburban showpiece. She picked up with her signature brightness. "Mr. Hampton, what can I do for you this fine morning?" "I want to sell my house," I said simply. A stunned silence. Then, "Your house, Alfred. You always swore you'd never leave that place. It's your history." "History is all it is," I answered. "And I don't want to spend what remains of my life being a chapter in someone else's story. I want a fresh start." She asked the usual questions, timeline, price, where I wanted to go. I didn't hesitate. "Savannah." Something small, 2 bedrooms, a garden if possible. And if there's a view of the ocean, even better. Margaret and I always said we'd retire there. I'm going to honor that dream even if I have to do it alone. Emma's voice softened. That's a beautiful thought, Mr. Hampton. I'll make some calls today. We can have your place photographed and listed within the week. When I put the phone down, I realized my notebook page was full. 3 calls, 3 life-altering decisions. The weight that had pressed on my chest for years was gone, replaced by something else, resolve. I sat back, staring at the morning light spilling across my study. For decades, I had been the reliable man, the provider, the one who bent so others could stand tall. But yesterday's laughter, my daughter's laughter, had broken something that could never be mended with money. I closed my notebook, stood and looked around my house. Every corner carried Margaret's memory, every creak of the floor held echoes of family dinners, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories. I loved this house, but I loved my dignity more. And from that morning on, nothing, not a daughter's demand, not a grandson's careless phone, would ever strip it from me again. The phone started ringing before sunrise on Monday. I had just laced up my walking shoes when Clara's name lit up the screen. I let it buzz until the voicemail clicked on. Then again, and again. By the 4th call, I finally answered, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. Dad. Her voice was already pitched high. What is going on? Ethan's school says tuition hasn't been paid. The bank says the mortgage transfer never came. I called Jonathan, and he told me you canceled everything. Tell me he's wrong. He's not wrong, I said calmly, sitting on the edge of my bed. I ended the transfers. All of them. A stunned silence followed. Then a sharp intake of breath. Dad, you can't just do that. We count on that money. Ethan's school, Victor's job, we structured our lives around your help, and that, I replied, is exactly the problem. She didn't hear me. Or maybe she refused to. Her voice cracked. Do you realize what this means? We'll fall behind. We might even have to live within your means, I finished for her. There was a beat of silence, then her fury erupted. How could you? After everything we've done for you, after every holiday, every invitation, this is how you repay us. Clara, I said quietly, pushing your father into a swimming pool isn't what I'd call repayment. She gasped as though I'd slapped her. Oh my God, you're still hung up on that. It was a joke, everyone laughed. You're being dramatic. Everyone laughed, I repeated. Except me. Before she could answer, another voice thundered through the line, Victor snatching the phone. Alfred, what the hell are you thinking? Do you realize the mess you've created? Without your contribution, we're looking at thousands in extra expenses every month. Thousands. Do you think we can just absorb that you're the new senior partner at your firm, aren't you? I asked evenly. Surely that comes with a salary. That's not the point, Victor barked. The point is, you promised. I never promised. I cut him off. You assumed. There's a difference. I could hear Clara in the background sobbing, saying, he's lost his mind. He's not himself. Victor lowered his voice, but the venom remained. Listen carefully, old man. You've been carried on our backs long enough. You live alone, rattling around in that big house while we scrape to make ends meet. And now you want to pull the rug out from under us. You'll regret this. Something inside me snapped, not anger, but clarity. No, Victor. I've been carrying you for years. Your house, your vacations, your son's school funded by a man you mock behind his back. The rug isn't being pulled out. You were never standing on solid ground to begin with. He sputtered, tried to interrupt, but I didn't give him the chance. From now on, your finances are your responsibility. Mine are mine. And if that's too much for you, then maybe you should reconsider what kind of man you really are. I ended the call, my hand steady on the phone. For a long moment, I sat in silence, listening to the ticking clock in the hallway. They called back, of course, again and again. I let it ring. When the voicemail filled, the texts began. From Clara, Dad, you can't do this to us. From Victor, you're destroying your family. Even Ethan chimed in, Grandpa, Mom's crying. Just fix this. But I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself a second cup of coffee, opened the window, and let the salt air drift in from the harbor. Their storm was raging, but inside me there was only calm. By mid-morning, Clara herself pulled into my driveway. I saw her car from the upstairs window, her door slamming as she marched up the walk. The bell rang loud and insistent, then pounding on the door. Dad, open this door right now. We need to talk. I didn't move. I let her bang until her fists must have ached. Finally, her voice cracked through the wood. If you don't answer, I'll call the police for a wellness check. Don't make me do that. So I opened the door. Slowly. Clara's eyes were red, her hair disheveled, her composure slipping. Dad, she pleaded. What are you doing? You're scaring me. Why are you acting like this? I met her gaze with the steady calm of a man who had already made his choice. I'm acting like a man who's finally taking back his life. Her lip trembled, but before she could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message from Victor. If you don't fix this, I'll see you in court. I showed her the screen. Looks like your husband has made his feelings clear. Now, Clara, it's time you heard mine. And with that, I stepped aside, motioning her into the house, ready for the conversation that would strip away the last illusions between us. Clara stepped into the hallway like someone walking onto foreign soil, glancing around as if the house she grew up in had suddenly become unfamiliar. The boxes stacked neatly by the wall caught her eye. Her voice faltered. Dad, what's all this? You're not moving, are you? I closed the door behind her. That's exactly what I'm doing. Her head snapped toward me. You can't be serious. This is our family home. You can't just sell it. I met her gaze steadily. It's my home, Clara. Mine. I built this life with your mother, and now I've decided to move on. She shook her head, tears already pooling. But why? Because of one stupid mistake at a barbecue. I told you it was a joke. Everyone knew it was a joke. I walked past her into the living room, motioning toward Margaret's framed portrait. Your mother would never have laughed at humiliating someone, least of all me. And do you know what hurt the most that day? Not the shove, not the cold water. It was that no one, not you, not Victor, not Ethan, asked if I was okay. Not one of you cared enough to check. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted away. I pressed on. When I left soaked and humiliated, no one followed me. No one tried to make it right. Instead, my grandson posted the video online for his friends to laugh at. She flinched at that. I made him delete it. After I confronted him, I reminded her. You didn't even know until I told you. Her arms crossed her old armor, sliding into place. Dad, you've always been like this. So dramatic, so stubborn. You twist everything into an insult. Victor and you, I interrupted, have been living off my back for years. Your house, my money. Ethan's school, my money. Your vacations, my money. And in return, I get lectures about how my stories are boring and how I should wear something decent so I don't embarrass you. Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. We invited you to everything. Holidays, birthdays, and then ignored me once I arrived. I said, my voice sharp now. You parade me like some antique chair. Useful for decoration, not worth listening to. The silence between us stretched heavy and raw. Finally, Clara's voice cracked. Dad, I was just trying to build a good life. For Ethan. For us, we needed your help. I softened my tone, but not my resolve. Help isn't the same as dependence, Clara. And you crossed that line years ago. She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. So what now? You're cutting us off just like that. No tuition, no mortgage, help, no inheritance. Yes, I said simply. All of it stops. The will is being rewritten. This house will be sold, and the money will be spent the way I choose, not the way you expect. Her head snapped up, eyes blazing. You can't. That's cruel. You'd rather give it to strangers than your own blood. I'd rather give it to someone who respects me, I answered. Whether that's a charity, a foundation, or maybe your son if he learns the value of respect. But you, Clara, not anymore. Her face went pale. Dad, please. Think about Ethan. Don't punish him for my mistakes. I leaned on the back of a chair, steadying myself. Ethan already punished himself. Posting that video, do you know how that felt? To realize my grandson thought my humiliation was entertainment. If he wants something from me in the future, he'll have to earn it, not by being my heir, but by being my family. Clara stood abruptly, anger surging through her tears. I can't believe you. You're not the father I knew. You're cold. You're heartless. No, I said quietly. For the first time in years, I'm alive. I'm clear. And I won't be treated like an ATM or a prop at your parties. She grabbed her purse with trembling hands. You'll regret this. When you're old and alone, when you need us, don't expect us to come running. I opened the door for her. Clara, I've already been old and alone, and you never came running. For a moment she hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak. Then she stormed past me into the driveway, her car engine roaring to life. I watched from the doorway as she sped away, a blur of fury and desperation. Inside the quiet house, I let out a long breath. My legs felt heavy, but my chest was light. It was done. The confrontation I had avoided for years had finally taken place, and though her words cut, they could no longer bind me. The clock ticked softly in the hallway, steady as my resolve. I was free. The morning after Clara's outburst, I woke before dawn, as I always do. But this time I didn't stare at the ceiling with that familiar heaviness pressing on my chest. Instead, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and felt something new: space. Space in my lungs, space in my mind, space in my life. I brewed coffee, black and strong, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. The list from 2 nights ago, new orders, lay open in front of me. I added one more line at the bottom in neat handwriting. Pack only what matters. It took me most of that day to begin. 45 years of life in one house doesn't fit neatly into boxes. Every drawer held some reminder: Margaret's scarves folded neatly in cedar photo albums, stuffed with birthdays and Christmas mornings, Ethan's crayon drawings from when he was still small enough to climb into my lap. For a moment, I almost faltered. Was I really ready to leave all this behind? But then I remembered Clara's voice at the pool, "Cool off, Dad," and the laughter. The laughter burned hotter than any memory could soothe. I chose carefully. Margaret's jewelry box, not for its value, but for her scent that still lingered faintly inside. 3 framed photos, our wedding day, Clara as a child missing her front teeth, and Ethan sitting proudly beside a birdhouse we'd built together. My books, the ones that had kept me company in silence, went into 2 boxes. A few sets of clothes, my gardening tools, and that was all. The rest I marked for the estate sale. Furniture, china, even my Buick. If I was starting over, I wanted to walk light. By the afternoon, the realtor Emma Chandler arrived with her clipboard and measuring tape. She walked through each room, jotting notes, shaking her head in admiration. "Mr. Hampton," she said finally, "this house will fetch above market value, no question. The craftsmanship, the upkeep, you've taken remarkable care of it. Buyers will be lining up." I nodded, though my chest tightened as I glanced around the living room. Margaret's favorite armchair still sat by the window, sunlight spilling over the worn fabric. I'd spent many nights in that chair holding her hand through the worst of her illness. Letting it go felt like letting her go all over again. "List it," I told Emma, "as soon as you can." That evening, Clara's number lit up my phone again. I almost ignored it, but something in me wanted the finality. "Dad," she began immediately, her tone raw. I heard from the realtor. "You can't do this. You can't just sell the house. It's ours, our family's. It's Ethan's legacy." I let her finish before answering. "It was never yours to claim, Clara. It's mine. And I'm choosing to move forward." She tried again, pleading, bargaining, even threatening legal action, but I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Good night, Clara," and hung up. The silence afterward was profound. For the first time in years, my home wasn't filled with her demands or Victor's smug interruptions. Only my breathing steady and sure. I spent that night in the guest room, my bed already stripped, my bedroom half empty. I wanted to feel what it was like to sleep in a house I no longer belonged to. And strangely, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like liberation. The next morning I walked through the garden one last time. Dew clung to the roses Margaret loved so much, their petals bending under the weight. I clipped one and tucked it into my shirt pocket. "This isn't goodbye," I murmured, to the garden, to the house, to Margaret. "It's just time." Then I locked the door, placed the key in an envelope for Emma, and set it on the counter. By the time I slid behind the wheel of a rental car, the house behind me was no longer mine. It was just another listing on a realtor's sheet. Ahead of me lay Savannah, the ocean, the salt air, the promise of mornings that belonged only to me. And for the first time in years, I smiled at the thought of tomorrow. Savannah welcomed me like an old friend I'd never met before. The first morning in my little seaside cottage, I woke to gulls crying overhead and the rhythmic hush of waves against the shore. The cottage was modest, 2 bedrooms, white shutters, a porch with creaking boards. But to me, it felt like freedom wrapped in sunlight. I spent my first days walking the shoreline at dawn, sand cool beneath my shoes, salt air filling my lungs. There were no demands here. No eyes rolling when I spoke. No one laughing at my expense. Just the ocean, endless and patient, reminding me that time could be vast and gentle. It was during one of those walks that I met Lydia Moore. She was kneeling in the community garden by the boardwalk, her straw hat tilted low, her hands deep in the soil. Rows of roses stretched before her, their colors vivid against the gray driftwood fence. "Morning," I called. She looked up, her face lined but bright, her silver hair pulled back into a simple bun. Morning yourself, she replied, brushing dirt from her gloves. You must be new. Haven't seen you around. I am, I admitted. Moved in last week, Alfred Hampton. Lydia Moore, she said, extending a gloved hand. Careful, I'm covered in soil. I shook it anyway. I don't mind. I used to keep a garden myself. Roses, mostly. My wife loved them. Her eyes softened. Ah, a man who knows his roses, that's rare. And just like that, a thread connected us. Over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn to the garden, helping Lydia weed, prune, and carry watering cans. We talked easily about her late husband, about her grown children scattered across the country, about books and music, and the peculiar comfort of routine. There was no judgment in her questions, no pity in her silences. She listened, really listened, in a way I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as we sat on the bench overlooking the ocean, Lydia handed me a small paper cup of lemonade. You've got kind eyes, Alfred, she said simply. I laughed softly. Kind, maybe. A little tired, too. We've all earned our tired, she replied. But kind, that's harder to keep. I thought of Clara then, of the hardness in her voice, the way she had shoved me into that pool, as if I were nothing but an inconvenience. For the first time since leaving Charleston, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. The kind of distance that protects rather than isolates. Our friendship grew in small, steady ways. Lydia introduced me to her circle, a group of retirees who met every Friday for cards, laughter, and seafood stew. They welcomed me without suspicion, as if I'd always belonged. I discovered I had a knack for cribbage, though I never won against Lydia. She had the patience of a saint and the cunning of a fox. Evenings often found me on Lydia's porch, sipping tea, while the sun slipped below the horizon. Sometimes we spoke of the past, her years teaching my years with Margaret, but often we just sat in comfortable silence watching the sky change colors. One evening, she asked quietly, "Do you miss them, your daughter and grandson?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of Ethan's laughter when he was small, the way he used to grip my hand tightly crossing the street. Then I thought of the glow of his phone screen as he recorded my humiliation. Yes, I said finally. But missing doesn't mean I want to go back. It just means I remember. She nodded as if she understood perfectly. Memories are companions. They don't have to be chains. Her words stayed with me. Perhaps that was what this chapter of my life was about, not erasing the past, but learning to carry it differently. By the time autumn rolled in with crisp winds sweeping through the marshes, Savannah no longer felt like an escape. It felt like home. I had new routines, new friends, and a peace I'd forgotten was possible. And in the middle of it all was Lydia, steady, thoughtful, and kind. Not a replacement for Margaret, never that, but proof that life still held room for connection, even after loss, even after betrayal. One evening as we locked up the garden shed, Lydia turned to me with a smile. "You know, Alfred, you look lighter these days. Happier." I smiled back, surprising myself with how true it felt. That's because I am. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when the letter arrived. The coastal wind rattled the shutters, carrying the smell of salt and pine into my little cottage. I almost missed the envelope tucked between a flyer for a fishing tournament and the usual stack of utility bills. The handwriting stopped me cold. I knew it instantly. Slanted, uneven, with letters pressed too hard into the paper. Ethan. For a moment, I just stood there, letter trembling in my hands. My grandson hadn't written me since he was a boy, back when he used to send little thank you notes for Christmas gifts, scribbled drawings of dinosaurs or rockets sometimes, with Margaret helping him spell the longer words. Now, after everything, after that poolside humiliation, after the video that had made me a spectacle for strangers, he was writing to me again. I carried the letter to the porch, sat down in my old rocker, and opened it carefully, as if it might crumble in my hands. Dear Grandpa, it began in that same clumsy handwriting. I know Mom came to see you, and it didn't go well. Things at home are bad right now. Mom and Dad fight almost every night. They say it's about money, but I think it's also about you. I just want to say I'm sorry for what I did. Posting that video was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I didn't think about how it would hurt you. I thought it was just funny. But seeing Mom cry after she came back from visiting you and thinking about how you left, I realize I messed up. I miss you. I miss the times we built birdhouses, the stories about the stars, and the way you taught me how to swim. I didn't know how much I missed it until you were gone. I don't want you to think of me as just another spoiled kid. I want to make it right. Please write back. Love, Ethan. I let the paper fall into my lap and sat there for a long time staring at the horizon where the ocean met the sky. The words blurred in my mind, tangled with memories. Ethan as a boy in rubber boots, chasing crabs at low tide, his laughter ringing out clear and unburdened. Could that same boy truly be behind the teenager who had filmed my humiliation? The rocker creaked as I leaned back, the letter still warm from my hands. For the first time in months, I felt something stir in me other than anger or resignation. A small, tentative hope like the first bud of spring after a long winter. I thought of Lydia's words just the week before. Memories are companions. They don't have to be chains. Perhaps this letter was proof of that proof, that the boy I once knew hadn't disappeared completely, just drifted the way all of us do when we're young and blind to what matters. And yet, I couldn't ignore the years of silence, the disregard, the way he had stood by while his mother laughed at me in front of strangers. One letter couldn't erase it all. Trust was like a porcelain plate once cracked. You could glue it together, but the lines never disappeared. I closed my eyes and asked myself the same question. I'll ask you now. What would you do if a grandchild who wounded you so deeply reached out with a trembling hand? Would you clasp it or let it fall away? The waves outside whispered, pulling back and rushing forward, as if the ocean itself were reminding me that life is nothing but tides coming together, drifting apart, returning again. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it on the small table beside me. Not forgotten, not answered yet. Just waiting. For the first time since I'd left Charleston, I didn't feel entirely alone. The days after Ethan's letter passed differently. I still walked the beach at dawn, still met Lydia at the garden, still savored the quiet routines I'd built for myself. But there was a new weight in my pocket. The envelope I carried folded neatly, as though keeping it close might help me decide what to do. Every time I pulled it out, I read the words again. I don't want you to think of me as just another spoiled kid. I want to make it right. I found myself remembering not the teenager with the phone camera, but the boy who used to sit cross-legged in my workshop, eyes wide as I showed him how to carve a birdhouse. I remembered his excitement when he learned the names of constellations, how he would run to Margaret with pride when he spelled them correctly. Maybe, just maybe, those pieces of him still existed, waiting for a chance to come back. But I also knew something important. I couldn't return to being the man they ridiculed, the man who handed over money just to buy scraps of attention. If I wrote back, it wouldn't be to slip back into old patterns. It would be on my terms, with my dignity intact. One evening, as Lydia and I watched the sun sink into the horizon, I asked her what she thought. "You know him better than anyone," she said, sipping her tea. "If you believe there's still goodness in him, maybe you should leave the door open. Just a little. Not wide enough for the whole family to trample through, just enough for a grandson who might be learning." I nodded. Her words rang true. Forgiveness didn't mean surrender. It meant deciding where to draw the line and daring to protect it. So a week later, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter back. Short, careful, but real. "Dear Ethan, thank you for your letter. I believe you when you say you're sorry, and I'm glad you remembered the things we once shared. I miss those times too. I'm not ready to step back into the old ways, but I am ready to see if you truly want to rebuild. If you'd like to visit me here by the ocean, the door will be open. Not for money, not for gifts, but for time together. Love, Grandpa." I sealed it and felt something inside me loosen like a knot untangled after years of being pulled tight. Whether Ethan ever came or not, I had made my choice to live in truth, not obligation. Now when I sit on my porch and watch the tide roll in, I feel a peace I never thought I'd find again. The laughter that once cut me like a knife at that poolside has faded, replaced by the sound of waves and the steady beat of my own heart. For the first time in decades, I belong to myself, and if Ethan walks up that path one day, I'll greet him with open arms, not because I owe him, but because I've chosen to. That, I think, is what real freedom looks like. Friends, let me ask you this. Have you ever reached the moment where you realized the greatest gift you could give yourself was not money, not comfort, but dignity? That's the journey I've walked, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your city or state, maybe even your own experience of drawing a boundary in family life. And don't forget, subscribe to Life Stories so you won't miss the next chapter. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder you're never too old to start living for yourself. Because in the end, respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you decide you deserve.